Hello, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in to kweliLIVE. I'm Matthew. I'm a multimedia fellow at Kweli TV, and we are so excited today because today we have the Menelik Shabazz. Thank you so much for taking time to meet with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, yes. Today we're going to be talking about his amazing documentary, The Story of Lovers Rock, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Black history and just kind of like his story in general. So I have so many questions about the doc, but before we get into that, can you kind of tell us a little bit about like yourself, your upbringing, and how you got into directing?
Okay, I was born in a tiny island called Barbados, which I think is now known to the world through Rihanna, who is one of our great exports. And but from an early age, I left. I was taken by my parents to go to the UK, and so that's pretty much where I've been from an early age. And in the UK experience, I was able to go to film school and able to embrace filmmaking and to develop a number of films and work for independently. I worked for the BBC, I've worked for ITV, I've worked for Channel 4. So I have been fortunate enough to be able to work in different genres and be able to have this work out there on various broadcasting and also independent networks. Forgive me, a little fly has decided that it wants to be part of this interview. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's me. So working independently, working in mainstream, and also winning a few awards along the way. So that's some of me. Some of me.
And were there any like films or documentaries growing up that you liked a lot that kind of inspired you to take this path?
Um, hmm, I really didn't get on this path consciously in the sense that I decided at a point in my life that I wanted to be a filmmaker prior to film school. What happened is that certainly I grew up in the Caribbean, in Barbados, in a village, and they used to run mobile cinema out in the pastures. And so I was introduced to film in that way. But I never saw myself connected to it as a filmmaker, really, until I went to, well, I was going to do art, go to art school, and then I failed one of my exams, and I had to retake. In the retaking process at another college, I was introduced to this new equipment, which was then called a porta pack, which was a kind of reel-to-reel with a camera attached to it. And that equipment kind of revolutionized my life, really. And it kind of introduced me to telling stories through this format. I was already a radical. I'd already been active on out of the Black Power movement. I was, an activist in a way. So I saw this as a way of also being able to express my ideas, what was happening, and all of that. And off that, I was actually staying with an African American woman who was at film school. And I remember I said to her, I want to make this film, and I wanted to shoot it on film. I didn't want to do it on the kind of reel to reel. And she was saying, okay, Menelik, that's cool. What are you going to shoot it on? What format? She was asking all these technical questions, which I had no idea what she was talking about. So she said to me, look, you know what? Rather than me being your donkey, I suggest you go to film school. And so that's kind of how it kind of sprang up. So I didn't, as I say, it was just like one step. At college, failing my exam, another door opens, and then I said, oh, wow. And then that's kind of pretty much how I got into filmmaking. I don't believe in chance necessarily. It was just my path. It was the way that I was able to get into filmmaking.
So,
And then once I went to film school, you know, that gave me the confidence to really go for it.
so what inspired the story of Lovers Rock, and like, where did your idea come from for this particular project, and why did you feel like it was so important?
Okay. Lovers Rock came about by me reading a newspaper, which was advertising a Lovers Rock gala where many of the artists were going to be appearing, and artists that are kind of in the twilight of their career and who I felt was a kind of the last hurrah in terms of being able to perform. And it was an instinctive feeling that I needed to document this moment. It was a feeling I had previously in one of my other films I did some years ago. So I get these feelings in terms of moments in history. And that felt to me was a moment that I should document. I didn't think about it as a film at the time. I just thought about it, oh, let me just record it, and spoke to the promoters, and we agreed. And it was really after I shot the concert that I began to think about how else can I present this? What else can I do with this document? And so then I started to then think about, okay, let me think about it as a film, had some more interviews. And then that's really how the process started. And then once I've started to get into it, I then began to look at what other elements can I add to it other than just a talking head concert situation. And that's kind of where I then looked at the kind of comedy, looking at the humorous elements, and looking at the culture and the things around Lovers Rock. And so it came about as a process rather than a conscious moment where prior to it, thinking that I wanted to do something about Lovers Rock. No, that wasn't in my head at all. It was just, as I say, out of that feeling that these artists were performing at, and it was an important moment.
It's nice that you mentioned that, like, you didn't want it to just be talking head, because one of my personal favorite parts of the documentary were the skits in between, like, each topic, where, like, the people were kind of, like, reenacting or reminiscing on the Lovers Rock, or, like, what it was like when they first met their first boo or something like that.
Mm.
So I really like that part of the documentary a lot. So you executed that really well. Um,
Yeah,
how?
because also just to add on that,
Mhm.
I was part of. I mean, I came in. I mean, I was a bit older, but I was able to witness and be part of that. So, and the intimacy that was really important in Lovers Rock, and I wanted to bring that out. And we had young people, doing the dance. Many of them have never danced like that before, so we had to kind of coach them, really. And and so that was important in bringing that intimacy, which I experienced, and was now able to bring that to bear in the film.
And how would you describe Lovers Rock? Because I see similar dances to it, even like in American culture as well. But like, how would you describe it? Because it's very intimate.
Yes, you have the same styles in the African American culture. You call it the slow drags, and we were so Lovers Rock is really a feeling of um, love, intimacy, and bringing out that feeling in different ways. So through music, song, and through dance. And so Lovers Rock, the genre that we was combine those two elements, um, and created an intimacy which was important in as part of a healing process, because we were going through a lot of political and cultural oppression in that, and racism, of course. And we, or the music, enabled us to have that space where we could be in our own and in a warm embrace with another person, and to be transported into a world of love, and that we didn't even experience in our families, you know, because at home we never got any hugs. And we got love, but not necessarily translated in that way.
Mhm.
And so, so the Lovers Rock was a healing mechanism for us to be able to cope with things that were happening outside, especially for the young men who were, you know, police brutality, racism in schools, and just being an outsider in the culture, because the African Caribbean culture or population is kind of relatively new. And so the first phases of that, we grew up, many of us were born there in the 70s, or late 60s, 70s. So it was being acclimatized to a new culture, new environment, and being outsiders in that environment, and trying to figure out how to create ways to survive. And so, reggae music was very important in that, and reggae music, you know, has different aspects of it. And so, Lovers Rock took on the romantic aspect of the Lovers Rock, and and developed on top of that, really. And so, and music came first, where they were borrowing from African American music in terms of songs, because it essentially was, they were remaking a lot of popular songs. And so there was that borrowing that happened, and the musicians themselves found who were not necessarily from Jamaica, they were coming from other islands, but they found a fusion that gave that particular sound that we know as, UK British Lovers Rock.
And it's nice that you bring it up because I was actually just about to ask, since Lovers Rock is a kind of reggae music, how
Yeah.
would you say it's been changed with the English culture, the culture in the UK? How would you say the sound of it has changed? Has it gotten more upbeat? Has it gotten slower?
The sound changed, only I guess it was softer.
Hmm.
And in the early days, the Jamaican artists and people used to look at it as kind of like soft, kind of almost irrelevant music, because reggae music was kind of like harder kind of music. So what Lovers Rock did was to kind of soften that feeling around that, and so and the musicians themselves were also borrowing from, as I say, African American structures, and trying to find their way navigating through the kind of, as African American and Jamaican path. I think so. So I think the difference is that it was a softer music, and people like Dennis Bovell, they actually, will talk about the rhythm and the beat that they put in, help to kind of give it that slightly different feel as well.
And after watching the documentary, I kind of see a lot of Lovers Rock in American R&B or even R&B like over the globe. Like they take a lot of inspirations from that culture.
Mm.
Um, sorry, I'm blanking, but how
Mhm.
would you say it's influenced R&B? Where do you see it like in music today? Because I don't feel like it's died. I feel like it's evolved as a genre.
Mm. Well, the thing is that the music itself borrows a lot from African American music,
Mhm.
and so, and taking that on, um, I I feel that its influence is to, in terms of certainly in reggae, it certainly opened up, and more Jamaican artists were embracing that style of reggae.
Mhm.
In the R&B, I'm not sure. I'm not a historian to be able to kind of track it in terms of. I mean, certainly some of the important artists that came out, Lovers Rock, Maxi Priest, people like UB40 were influenced by Lovers Rock. Sade made an album that was called Lovers Rock, and in Japan it became a big genre. So in that way, I can see how it's influenced. In terms of the overall music scene, I'm not sure how that all plays out, really, to be honest. Certainly, the African American has music has always had that thread to it,
Mhm.
and so I think the influences generally tends to come from you guys in terms of the the um, the music that is often borrowed out, from Lovers Rock, or borrowed from African American music into Lovers Rock, and I think that played kind of a very big influence. Yeah, so it's yeah, it gave us an intimacy, and the intimacy I think is expressed in I think especially in the diaspora. I think if you look at as African American music, if you look at other musics in other parts of the Caribbean, even Latin music, I said Latin, salsa, different. We're seeing expressions of this intimacy,
Mhm.
and so Lovers Rock is really, bringing that to the fore.
And you guys touch on it a little bit in the documentary as well, is that a lot of the Lovers Rock artists didn't get, the credit that they deserved or the recognition that they deserved. And do you think that was because like it was only popular in the UK Caribbean black crowd, or that it just wasn't being translated over? I mean, now we have streaming services, so more people can actually listen to it, more people can actually appreciate how great it is. But why do you think it just didn't get the recognition it deserved at first?
The reason I believe is that one, airplay. We didn't get the kind of important airplay that we needed, the music needed, and the music was created independently of the mainstream. And as we know with our music generally, our independent musics generally are pushed aside. Um, and so, even though there were a few exceptions in terms of Janet Kay's film, City Games that went to #1, and so on, which should have heralded a kind of explosion on the mainstream, it kind of really was kind of not encouraged. And we know that through the people who have been working either in the BBC or who are working in radio, trying to get, or producers trying to get their music into the mainstream. So I think the mainstream generally shuns black music that is authentic to itself,
Mhm.
that is outside of its influence. And the great thing about reggae music and then Lovers Rock is that we were able to empower ourselves to create the music, that we didn't rely on um, um, getting our music out and selling it to disc jockeys so that they can play it and all that.
Mhm.
We didn't rely on it in terms of producing. So we were able to produce our own music, create our own studios. So that meant that we were empowered. And reggae music itself is also a testimony to that empowerment, as you had in Motown in the US.
Mhm.
So that empowerment created a certain power that we knew that we could, if we got a good song, whatever, we could get it recorded. We didn't have to wait, go through filters and so on. So that created a certain energy. Um, and so Lovers Rock um, took up on that. And we had sound systems that were playing the music in the clubs, in the dance, at the parties. So we were independent. And I think that independence always empowers us, but when it comes to navigating the mainstream, it tends to not want to engage with our authentic sounds until it's like 10 years later or 15 years later down the line. So the Lovers Rock didn't get, as I said, the airplay that it deserved. But because of the sound system and because we were creating music, it still lives, you know, and it's a testimony to its well, to the music, to the fact that, you know, we were creating and producing our own music, our own vinyl, all of that. It, you know, meant that the music can live and lives on.
And it's such a shame because you honestly see so many artists pull from that type of music, from that genre,
Mhm.
and they kind of like sell it as like this new sound, but in reality, they got their inspiration from reggae music, lovers rock. It's honestly the most bizarre thing, but I'm glad that it's finally starting to get, the recognition that it deserves.
Mhm.
So, what would you say was the most difficult part of making the documentary?
The most difficult part. Mm, the most difficult, I guess, would be raising the funds to
Hmm.
do it, because it was largely self-financed, and I did do a crowdfunding, but in those times, crowdfunding didn't really take on that much. I mean, I did get some funds from it, but it was largely my own resources that went into making the film. So and so that you know, fed into then, you know, the rights, music rights, and all of that currency, all that stuff you had to navigate. So so the financial side of it would be the most challenging for me, um, um, and it's often the case for independent filmmakers. You know, we always have to find a way to do that. But because I'm a very passionate person and I make films that come from my passion, I don't see obstacles as a way that I maybe did some years ago, in terms of finance. I believe that once I believe in the project, I have the passion, then it will get made somehow.
And I think this is probably one of the most perfect films for the month of February for Black History Month because you're learning some Black history, and it's also the month of love, Valentine's Day. So it really fit the theme of this month. But what are you looking forward to most for Black History Month?
Well, I see Black History Month as every month. I mean, I'm kind of challenged when I think of things in a month. I think of history on a monthly spread. So I look on it as on the one hand, it's useful for younger people coming up, maybe. I'm not sure that it gives the type of information that really empowers as much as we need.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure, you know, the important people um, like Marcus Garvey is fully recognized for what he contributed and who he is. And so, and of course, there are others. So, my feeling is that I'd say on the one hand, um, it's useful, um, but the idea of it being on a monthly, once every yearly, when other people's history is told every day, uh, it's challenging for me to kind of think in that box. And because it just by having that box suggests that you are different, you're other. Your history is not as important as other histories, and so that for me is a challenge when I think about it in that way.
Were there any historical Black figures growing up that you really were inspired by, or that really influenced you today?
Certainly, Marcus Garvey, as I've said, Malcolm X, my name, Shabazz, is kind of coming from that root. People like Menelik of Ethiopia,
Mm,
who defeated the Italians in the Battle of Adwa, 1896. So there are influences. There were people like Huey P. Newton coming up, Rat Brown coming up. So that the Panthers were influential. Um, so yeah, people like Walter Rodney was another one. So there were quite a few inspirations coming up because I grew up at a time during the Black Power period, which was a very inspiring time. And so a lot of those who came to the fore at the time, you know, Malcolm X, um, as I say, Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture, um, and I was, you know, inspired by the actions that they were taking, the Black Panthers were taking in rising up out of the, you know, our continual oppression. So these were important influences on me.
And you mentioned some Black radicals. Is all of your film work kind of inspired by Black culture, or they kind of have like a Black undertone, or is that like the work you focus on mostly?
Yeah, my work is focusing on the upliftment
Hmm.
of my people exclusively, because that is my work, is my path, and I always understood that. And so, and also I work for my passion. So the things that inspire me, or things that drive me, are to do with my culture, are to do with my people. And so my work reflects that without a doubt and without any apology.
And last question, Quaggy means truth. So, what would you say your truth is as a Black filmmaker?
My truth is love.
Mhm,
That's my truth. And love expressed in all of its expansiveness.
mhm,
And so love is the thing that we as a people need the most. We need that because we are people that are broken in terms of our history. And so we're fractured. The love that we represent is fractured. And so in this moment, going forward, it's about how do we bring that love back into our vibration in a way that is honoring who we are, not just a fragmented piece of love, you know, which is kind of people look at it in terms of the romantic element and so on. But love in its fullness, which is to your, you know, your fellow man, your own people, love in terms of the economy, because love is also economics. You know, once you love yourself, you know, you buy and you love your people, you will buy their products and support them, like kweliTV is an, you know, is an expression of love to bring our images out there, and the more we support it with our love, the more that it can grow and develop. So love is at the core of who I am, and expressing that is what I try to do.
Well, thank you so much, Menelik, for taking time out of your day to get interviewed by us. The doc is amazing. If you guys want to watch it, it's streaming right now on kweliTV. It's called The Story of Lovers Rock. Check it out. It's perfect for Black History Month. It's perfect for any time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.